What is a histogram? A histogram is a picture of a frequency distribution, which shows frequency or count versus classes, which consist of numbers or intervals of numbers on the real number line. For instance, in this case, we have the ages of 50 randomly selected people at the mall, and we see that there were 6 people ages 7 to 18 years old, 10 people ages 19 to 30 years old, and so forth. Let's talk about how to make a histogram. Here we have cholesterol levels for 20 randomly selected individuals. The units are milligrams of cholesterol per deciliter. These numbers don't really tell us very much. A frequency distribution is a method of organizing the data so that we can see patterns. Let's construct a frequency distribution of this data using 5 classes. The first thing we have to do is to type the data into Excel, and so we do that. Now that we have typed in the data, we need to sort the data. We first block off the data and then we click on the Data tab. Then we see Sort. We click on that. Smallest to largest, that's what we want. So notice that the data is not sorted. 198, 212, 200, and so forth. When we click on OK, the data is now sorted. The next thing we need to find is the range of the data. The range is a crude measure of spread, or the range is the maximum value minus the minimum value. Since we have sorted the data, we can see that the minimum value is 160, the maximum data is 242. We create an Excel formula by typing equals. We click on the maximum value, type a minus sign, and we click on the minimum value. We see that the range is 82. The next thing that we need is the class width, where the class width is the range, or 82 in this case, divided by the number of classes, 5 in this case. We create another formula that is equals. We click on the range, we type in the division symbol, and we click on the number of classes. We must round our number up to the next whole number. Our class width is 17. We're ready to set up our classes. LCL means lower class limit. UCL means upper class limit. Each class has a lower class limit and an upper class limit. Since with 5 classes we must contain all the values from the minimum to the maximum, we set the first lower class limit to the minimum value in the data set, or 160. To generate the lower class limits, we add the class width to successive classes. We do that by creating an Excel formula for the second class, and then we copy that formula to the next 3 classes. We begin by typing an equal sign, and then we click on the first class's lower class limit. Then we type in plus the class width, or 17. We click on the check mark to stay in this cell. We then copy this formula by finding the handle in the lower right hand corner. Notice how the icon changes from a big plus to a small crosshairs when you have that lower right hand corner, which is the handle. Left click and pull to drag the formula, or copy the formula to the next 3 cells. We now have the 5 classes lower class limits. They all differ by the class width, which is 17. We now construct the upper class limits, where successive upper class limits also differ by the class width. Classes can have no gaps and they cannot overlap. This means that if the second class begins with a cholesterol level of 177, the first class must have an upper class limit of 176. We type that in. Now we create the same formula to generate the upper class limits. We type in equals, we click on the 176, we type in plus the class width, or 17. We click on the check mark, we grab the handle in the lower right hand corner, and we click and drag to copy that down to generate the 5 upper class limits. We should always check to see that the last class contains the maximum value, which is 242. We see that it does in this case. Now that we have the class limits and the data sorted, we could do a frequency distribution by hand. So a frequency is a count, so we put F here for frequency. So for the values between 160 and 176, we can see that that is these three values here. So this class has a frequency of 3 for cholesterol levels between 177 and 193. We see that that is 178 through 188, and we can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values here. However, if this was 200 values instead of just 20, it would be very difficult to do this by hand. Since this is 2017, we have Excel, and we will use Excel's built-in histogram tool found under the Data tab to automate this function. If you have not previously installed the Data Analysis add-in under the Data tab, you must first install it. To enable the Data Analysis option under the Data tab, we first click File, then we click Options. Then we click on the Add-ins selection. What we're looking for is the Analysis Tool Pack. We click on that. Now click on the Go tab, select Data Analysis Tool Pack and Analysis Tool Pack VBA. Check both of those boxes, click on OK. Now that we have installed the data analysis package, we click on the Data tab and we see that we have the Data Analysis option, so we click on that. We select histogram, click on OK. Then it wants the input range. What that means is the data, so block off the data. Now this is important. Bin range is the upper class limits. Before you tell it where the upper class limits are or the bins are, first click in this text box. Now block off the upper class limits. The next thing you want to do is to click on the radio button for output range. Also important, before you tell it where the output range is, click in this box. Now, for your output range, click in this cell. The last thing you want to do is to tell it that you want a chart output. Check that box. Now click on OK. Now you have the bins have been replicated. They're the upper class limits. You now have the frequencies. 3 in the first class, 6 in the second class, and so forth. You have a histogram over here. Let's pull it so we can see it, but it needs some work. For one thing, we don't need this frequency thing, so we click on that and we delete it. First of all, the chart does not have a proper title. We highlight the histogram box and we type in cholesterol levels. Frequency is okay as a vertical axis label. That's bin is not appropriate. We highlight bin and we type in for that also cholesterol level. We should give a unit, milligrams per deciliter. Now that we have axis titles and units, the next thing is that the bars in the histogram should touch. To make that happen, we left click on any bar. Notice that when we do that, all the bars are selected. Then while hovering above any bar, right click. Then select Format Data Series, then select Gap Width. Pull the gap width to 0. Bars now touch. Another thing that would be nice would be data values. So if we right click above any bar once again, we can select Add Data Labels. The next thing is the more classes there, just as a check to see that you set up your class limits properly. It should read 0, and it does. So we want to get rid of that both here, but most importantly on our histogram. To do that, we highlight More and 0. Then we select the Home tab. Then we find a red X mark in this icon and we click that. Presto. The More class is gone and it's gone from here as well. We now have a rather splendid histogram, but there is one problem. The classes are not labeled properly. The classes are labeled with the bins, which are the upper class limits. What we need to have is the lower class limit to the upper class limit. So for example, this class should be labeled 160 through 176 instead of just 176. To make that happen, we will use the concatenate function in this column. We label this as LCL through UCL. Once we put the lower class limit and upper class limits in these cells, we will copy these as values into the bins column, which is what Excel is using to create these labels. We first click on the cell where we want to put concatenate. Then we type E, start an Excel equation, and then we start typing concatenate. We type C. Excel is trying to guess what we want. We don't see concatenate yet, so we type O. And there it is, concatenate. We left double click on it so that we don't have to type the entire equation. Then it shows us the syntax. The first string that we want is, for the first class, 160, the first lower class limit. But we don't type in the 160, we tell Excel where the 160 is. We click on that cell. Excel knows that it's in cell E2. For the next text string, which is the dash, we type a comma, and now Excel is waiting for text string 2. All text strings must start with a quote and end with an unquote. So we type quote, we type the dash, we type unquote. Then we type comma for the next text string. That's going to be the 176. But once again, we tell Excel where the 176 is. We click on that cell. The way we play Excel is we create the formula once using relative cell reference, and then we copy that formula to the remaining cells. We finish concatenate by closing the parentheses. Having done that, we click on the check mark to stay in that cell so we can copy. Now we have the lower and upper class limits for the first class in a single cell. We get the handle in the lower right hand corner, and we once again copy. Left click and drag to the remaining 4 classes. Now need to do is to copy and paste these as value into the bins column. Excel is using bins to label these classes. So we hover above class limits, we right click, we copy. Then we left click on the top cell in the bin column. We right click and our paste options come up. We want paste value, which is the 1, 2, 3 icon. Left click on the 1, 2, 3 icon, and what we see now is the bins have now been replaced with the lower and upper class limits as desired, and most importantly, our classes are now labeled correctly.